Mysteria Luna, broadcasting the forbidden and decoding the hidden signal.
Precursor programs that were actually out there. And Whitley has doesn't remember a lot of his experience there, but he said that it was so traumatizing to him what happened to him. He remembers a lot of noise and not a lot else, but it traumatized him to the point where he was hospitalized and his entire immune system shut down, and he was pumped with drugs to help his immune system because of the trauma, but he does not remember what happened at all in it.
Crazy. All right. Welcome back to Mysteria Luna. Today we're going to be talking about Desta's new book, MK Ultra for Children, The Hunt for Psychic Abilities Through the Gate Program. This book is mind-blowing. It forces us to reconsider our early days in elementary school with gifted programs. It dives deep into everything from psionic abilities to dissociative states to MK Ultra programs and the strange overlap with other paranormal encounters. Desta has clearly done an enormous amount of research with this book. It is scary. I'm surprised the CIA is not kicking our door down right now. This is nuts. Desta, great book. Good work.
Thank you.
What exactly is the GATE program? So many people are talking about it. Let's dive into it.
Yes. A lot of people seem to be coming forward and now saying that they were GATE kids as well. So the GATE program means Gifted and Talented Education Program. There was many other names for it, and we are in Canada, and in Canada we did not, we were never told that it was GATE here. It was just called, for my specific school, was just linked into different color groups. So my enrichment class, which is
that's what mine was called too. The enrichment.
Yeah. So I think I never heard anyone so far that of Canadians that have said it was called Gifted or Gifted and Talented. But when I did my FIPA request to try getting my childhood documents, when I was in school, to see if they said anything, they called it Gifted and Talented. But I never heard anyone in Canada say that the school called it that. So.
And I think in those documents too, that there was an overlap from the US into the Canadian education system too, wasn't there? Wasn't there some related things with guys who worked in the States who were working in Canadian gifted and talented programs?
Well, from the FIPA request?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, just definitely.
Some of the main guys, they would go down to meetings in the States all the time to learn from these guys in the States about gifted and talented programs.
Well, yeah. So the gifted teachers in the States would come up to Canada to teach the teachers here what they were doing for the. Yeah. So I found that from the FIPA request is that there was a lot of, especially Texas, there was a lot of teachers from Texas that were coming up here and giving presentations on it. And there was also, even in Germany, there was conferences, gifted and talented conferences, where a lot of teachers were going to, I guess they were just sharing ideas or whatever, but there was a lot of teachers from Canada that would go down to the States to learn what they were doing, and conferences all over the place.
So like all the smart kids in the class, I remember, were selected and taken out of the classroom, and they would go off and do different things. And they came back and no one talked about it. Do you think there was some connection between some weird, maybe nefarious government things going on there? What do you think?
Well, I don't know about nefarious, but that's like obviously one of the underlying theories. So yes, we were taken out of the class. The other two, we had two other, in my class, we had two other groups that would get together, and they would just move all the desks in the, from the front of the class to the back of the class, and then they would just, in those two different classes, they would do their own extracurricular learning things that they had to do. But we were taken out, and interestingly enough, a lot of people online say that they were taken to their guidance counselor's office. Usually, sometimes it was done in like trailers outside of the school, like in the schoolyard, or attached, like little like whatever trailers attached to the actual school. I bet because we were in Canada, they couldn't really heat those kind of things, especially in Winnipeg in the winter. So we didn't have that. We just went to the guidance counselor's office. But one of the the things that everyone talks about online is being in a windowless room or attached to the library. And again, my class was in the shape of an L, and the library was in the very like middle of the L, and our guidance counselor's office was literally attached in that L. So there was no windows because the windows were like on the back of it where the library was, but we were on the inside, of that L. So my guidance counselor's office had no windows. It had a door, and the door had like frosted glass on it. So it was a dark, windowless room, just like everyone else also says online. And a lot of our classes we were just taken out of her office and brought to the library. And I don't know if she locked the door behind us. Like, I don't know if it was supposed to be just us in the library, but we spent a lot of time in the library, and there was never any other kids in the library except for us and the librarian, well, who I assume was still there. But yeah, so I have the same experience as a lot of other people, like that a lot of these were conducted in the library as well.
So I guess some people would just argue, oh, they were just looking for the next prime minister, or they're looking for gifted doctors. But a lot of people are saying some other things. I think, and you think, it has something to do with psionic psychic abilities. That's what the book is about. It touches on that a lot. Can you elaborate on that? How did you first get into the whole notion? Tell us the story of how you got the whole idea, what it was that triggered you about the GATE program.
Well, what triggered me is that I was seeing people discussing it online, the GATE program online, and I didn't know, I never heard of the GATE program before. So quite a few interviews and quite a few channels that I saw that were talking about it, I didn't even know what it was. So I listened to a little bit of it. It didn't ring any bells or do anything until some people, I think the first thing that really caught my attention was people saying that they couldn't remember the program at all, and they didn't have a good memory of their childhood. And then maybe someone said it was like an enrichment or some kind of like extracurricular like activity program. And I thought, oh, wait a second, I was in one of those, but it wasn't GATE. It was called an enrichment class. And I don't have any memories of most of my childhood. And then I started thinking, what do I remember about that class? When do I think I was in it? And then I started thinking, I remember a few, like I remember the right when we would start the class, going and being with the teacher and the first couple minutes of the class. And that was always followed by, now drink your juice, which was the pink liquid in a little Dixie cup, which everyone talks about online. And a lot of the times after that, it was nap time. So, and when I remember nap time, we had to lie on the floor. I guess obviously there wasn't couches in the things, but I think that's really weird. I was in grade 5 and it was like nap time, and we just all slept on the, like went for a nap on the carpet. And she had a stereo system, and we listened to, like, I remember a lot of like waves and crashing waves and like really relaxing things. But we also had times where we had those headphones, the big brown or gray, massive headphones, and it was the like beep boop 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 boop, like the really weird like tones. And I still remember crashing waves in the back. I can't remember now if, like, when I looked into the gateway process, the Robert Monroe Institute gateway process, if there was the crashing waves, but I remember there was a lot of like, quiet music and weird tones and stuff. And then it was nap time, and I don't have a lot of, I hardly remember anything after that. So I always remember the beginnings of the class, different things that we would do. But once we got the pink drink, I don't remember anything after that. And I was in the program for 4 or 5 years, and I only, remember the very first couple of minutes when we were doing they had the Zener cards, the tangigrams, like when we were trying to do puzzles. And I remember it being a lot of guessing games. Like, what do you think the next this is going to be? So whether we were using the cards with each other, and so like, what do you think the next card that she's going to pull out of the deck is? Or like the tones in our ears, there was some like, what do you put up the hand where you think the next tone is going to come? Or like a lot of just like puzzles and stuff. Where do you think that the next thing is going to be placed? What do you think? So we just thought it was guessing games. I never remember thinking that it was anything other than guessing games. But I guess that is another way to say it was like precognitive or like telepathic, like they were trying to test us in some way. Remote viewing, it was trying to test us in some way about that kind of stuff. But in those days, I just thought it was guessing games, like, and I thought the drink, she called it pink, or she just called it juice, right? So now they're saying it's like the pink drink, and it was pink, but I just thought it was, the teacher giving us juice.
Yeah, I remember watching some of those videos with you, and we would listen to some of the accounts, people talking about the headphones, the pink drink, and we're like, holy shit, this same weird memories. Well, I didn't have those, but you said you did. But we were listening to an interview with Jake Barber, and he said he was in a gifted program. And we're like, holy shit. And then Jordan Jozak, who's also connected to Jake Barber, said he was too, didn't he?
So
What did he say?
These two people are UFO whistleblowers, and we're in the UFO community, so for people that are just listening to this because they were in the GATE program, Jake Barber was ex-military, and he is a UFO whistleblower who came forward and testified to being part of a crash retrieval program. So there was in this interview we're talking about, it was a News Nation with Ross Coulthard interview, and Jake was talking about being like going to retrieve a crashed saucer, which was this in the like the form of an egg-shaped craft. And when he picked it up and was flying away with it in the helicopter, he had a very, what do you want to call it?
He said it was like a spiritual experience that moved him,
Spirit,
even
yeah.
made him
So
cry.
very moved, very emotional connection to this craft, where he, got some messages. Kind of, he felt it was a female presence that was either in this craft or that was this craft. And yeah, that he had a very moving, very puzzling, strange experience for him. But we later learned that he was part of the GATE program as well. And Jordan Jozak is another much younger kid who isn't in the military, but he was also in the GATE program much more recently. And he's a psionic asset, what they're calling them, part of the Skywatcher program, which is Jake. I don't know if he runs it, but Jake is part of the Skywatcher program, and Jordan is one of the psionic assets who is part of the program as like a psychic, basically there to call down the crafts, to communicate with the crafts, with the UFOs. So the connection that we keep thinking, because we're from the UFO community, you and I, then for the people online that are saying there might be a psychic connection or they might be a UFO connection, I mean, we're really in that rabbit hole and have been for over a decade. So the background that we have from it, and for me, having a lot of like psychic experiences in my life and abilities, then that really hit home when I heard about that, because that is my story completely, and it made it really credible and interesting, and made me want to research and to dive deeper into the subject.
Yeah, no kidding. And you were recently in a video interview with Whitley Strieber where he mentions that he was in a similar program when he was young. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, he doesn't remember much about it, and he was in it in the 50s, which we think is the precursor, because the real GATE program, they started talking about it in the late 50s after Sputnik, after the Russians, the Americans thought that the Russians were maybe going to win the Cold War. So the Americans really got scared and wanted to start doing a search for the best and brightest kids. And so they were looking for people in high school at first. There was something called Project Talent, where they were testing, I think they have 400,000 teenagers that were tested, because they were trying to be able to track people and put them in some of these STEM programs, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. So they were trying to find kids with high IQs and capabilities in some of these ways to make sure that we would win the Cold War, basically, right? The space race. So they were doing that, actively doing that, looking for smart kids and for kids that they could, help go through into some of these government programs, intelligence, space or technology, degrees and career paths. So like, to help the states in general.
so many weird synchronicities surrounding this too that we've experienced over the past few months looking into this. I mean, just the other day, I heard that Jack Sarfati was possibly in a similar program. He said that when he was a kid, he was brought into these tests that they were doing on telepathy, and they were introduced. These adults in his college or his school, wherever he was, were talking about psychokinesis, paranormal powers, and they, like, all these kids, it seems like they were groomed from the beginning, possibly. Really strange.
Yeah, and I didn't finish the Whitley Strieber part of that story, but Whitley, so these programs, the GATE program probably started so after 57, so the late 50s, but into the early 60s they were really starting to make the programs, and at least in Canada in the 70s, the beginning of the 70s was implemented across Canada. But so Whitley, and I have other people that that I've talked to, that I've interviewed, that were part of this program as well, and they also say it was more like the early to mid 50s. So there must have been, you know, precursor programs that were actually out there. And Whitley has doesn't remember a lot of his experience there, but he said that it was so traumatizing to him what happened to him. He remembers a lot of noise and not a lot else, but it traumatized him to the point where he was hospitalized and his entire immune system shut down, and he was pumped with drugs to help his immune system because of the trauma, but he does not remember, you know, what happened at all in it.
Crazy. In your book, chapter 14, you talk about dissociation. I think this is a really key aspect to the connection to the GATE program and what might be going on in these programs, what they're looking for. Can you explain dissociation and how it relates to the GATE program?
Yep. So dissociation is, that's a big part of the book. Like I talk about it throughout the whole book because I think it's one of the key factors in it. And I really started looking into this aspect of it through Dr. Colin Ross, who was a Canadian psychiatrist who specialized in DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, what used to be called multiple personality disorder. Um, and he also read all of the MK Ultra documents and wrote a fabulous book called The CIA Doctors, which he goes through all of the documents and you know, analyzes the documents, and basically, you know, he was like a whistleblower that came forward from psychiatry to tell the world what the psychiatrists were doing, completely breaking their Hippocratic oath and causing harm, and not even telling like any of these subjects that they were part of a program, right? When they were getting dosed with LSD, electroconvulsive shock therapy, hypnosis, mind control, psychic driving, patterning, like the depatterning. There's a lot of crazy things that happen during this time. And so Dr. Colin Ross is like an expert in dissociation because of dissociation identity disorder. So dissociation is basically the he says that dissociation identity disorder is not something that you like are born with. It's not hereditary. It's something that is made in you, and especially if it's a child, you know, especially around 5 or 6 years old, that undergoes trauma. So that's like trauma is one of the things that can create a dissociation. And dissociation basically means when you're like leaving this realm, and like your brain kind of splits, your psyche splits and opens up a door. So I think what Dr. Ross says is it's like an emergency exit that your brain makes to preserve your life in a traumatic situation. So if something traumatic happens to you, you just kind of like split, like you split, and you're like creating a compartment and you just go to the next compartment. That's how alters are made in multiple personality disorder, is that you're traumatized and the child doesn't know how to deal with it. The situation is too overwhelming. So they just like, you know, the psyche splits and dissociation opens a door and you just go into the next space, right?
And that's what they did
yourself.
In the satanic ritual abuse cases. They said that that was a big part of it too. And with MK Ultra, similar experiences.
And with alien abductions, like
right.
Yeah, David Jacobs and Dr. Colin Ross himself and Whitley Strieber also all say that there is big links to dissociation, alien abduction, well, everything. You can link almost anything now, remote viewing, psychic abilities, and even the CIA under something called Subproject 136. It was one of the only subprojects. MK Ultra had like 150 different subprojects, and this one specifically was one of the only ones where they actually tested on children, or admit that, like that we could see where they actually like document that.
Yeah,
And
they say they were testing psychotics, mediums, and children right in the documents.
yeah, and I can't think of the quote from the document. I don't know if you have it there, but it says like special attention to be paid to dissociative states that often accompany, or it's not accompany, it's often precede
Spontaneous ESP experiences. Yeah.
ESP experiences. So they
Such
knew.
such states can be induced or controlled to some extent with hypnosis and drugs. Holy shit.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they
And
knew that.
those are from the declassified MK Ultra documents.
Yeah.
We don't know much about it, but we know that for sure that they looked into hypnosis and drug-induced states, disassociation with mediums, psychotics, and children.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's the main link, is that we don't know. There is no actual proof that the GATE program had anything to do with, CIA funded MK Ultra stuff, but they set the precedence by showing that they were testing dissociative states on children and ESP incidents. We know that from other projects as well that they were doing, and that they were Project Talent is showing that they were searching for kids that had high IQs and documenting that and keeping that data. And some people think following some of those kids after that for decades, or possibly throughout their whole lives, right? So we know that they did it. We know they had the capabilities of doing it. Do we know that they did it in GATE? Of course not. But another strange coincidence that might be a dead giveaway that they were doing this is because Project Stargate was the remote viewing program that the CIA also conducted. And that was the remote viewing project that they did in the 70s to the 90s. And the Gateway program, which is Robert Monroe's like application of where he made binaural beats that people would hear, which a lot of people think that's what we were listening to as gate kids, which was going to kind of like send you into an altered state. It was like something that was going to pop you out of your body and create a dissociation, which is also like an out of body experience, which was going to let you explore other states of consciousness. So because and those are Project Stargate and the Gateway process, and this is the GATE program. So of course we're thinking that since the CIA studied the Gateway process, and of course we're involved in Project Stargate, then it's very strange they chose to call this the GATE program. And just seems like it follows what they were doing, follows their pattern.
And I think that was the key point of what they were looking for. The how to explain it? When you are in these dissociative states, you get these abilities like remote viewing, these psychic tendencies. So they figured out a long time ago that when someone splits, dissociates, they can do all sorts of things that they normally couldn't do. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what they're looking for. Another question I had, I read in the book that a lot of kids that were in the GATE program were terrified and actually scared to go back to school. You have some memories about that. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely I heard that online, and that was another big part for me because I don't have lots of memories of my childhood. But when I called my mom to ask her last year, when I started researching or looking into all this, I asked her what she remembered about me being in the green group. That's what our group was called. And she said she didn't hardly remember anything about my childhood, but the one main thing that she remembers is when I was very young, 5 or 6. And of course, I was 7, I think. Yeah, I was 7 when in grade 2, and that was my first year, I think, in the GATE program. And she remembers me coming home from school one day being hysterical and crying and locked myself in the bathroom and said, I'm never going back to school again. And she of course was horrified by this, and she was trying to get it out of me what exactly was wrong. Her mind of course jumped to I was abused in some way, at school, or why else would I be so scared? And I wouldn't tell her. And I also remember that, being too scared to go. And I've thought about that many, many, many times over my entire life. I remember sitting in the bathroom being terrified. And I've thought about this 1,000 times, since it actually happened. And I have no idea, no memory, not even a little bit of what it was, why I was so scared. So I've always thought of that, but I never would have ever put it towards the GATE program because I didn't even know about the GATE program. I didn't know enrichment was weird. I didn't know anything. So I have always thought about what it was and didn't know. And yeah, so I definitely was traumatized. My mom let me stay home for school for a week, and I would not tell her what was wrong. And then, she eventually had to go back to work. So she said she would come and stand at the back of my school class, for my classroom for the day, and see what was going on. And of course she said, she couldn't figure out why I was so scared or whatever. So she, had to make me stay there, and I stayed. But yeah, I definitely have that same memory, and I still don't know why. And I've tried through like many meditations, self-hypnosis, channeling, a whole bunch of things to try and get a couple more memories. And I've maybe got a couple more memories that I'm separating from my, my memories that I could remember with my own memory and not having to go into these states. And I can't get past that. So I don't know what it was that was so terrifying. My mom said she asked other parents. No one remembers anyone else, any other kids. I asked some of my friends. No one remembers being terrified of going back to school either. But I was the only one that was part of this GATE program. So I don't know why it was.
Something probably happened to you for sure, especially considering if you look at some of the weird things related to the GATE program, MK Ultra, and Winnipeg. That's the city you were in. Your mom used to work with Dr. Colin Ross. When you told me that, my mind was blown. I was like, there's no way she's making this up. This can't be true. Like, Colin Ross is the main guy who writes about MK Ultra.
Right. So it's like I always knew she worked for Colin Ross, and I've seen him in videos talking about.
Your mom was a nurse, right? And what was he doing?
So my mom was a psych nurse, and he was the psychiatrist. He was the main psychiatrist of the department. So my mom was taking care of those patients with.
I got a question for you.
DID, yep.
Were you MK Ultra?
No, and for sure Colin Ross had nothing to do with it. He wasn't there until after I was out of my GATE program, is like around that time is when he came into, or actually it was quite a few years later, I think, that he came to Winnipeg. But yes, he was my mom's boss. And I only started linking him into this because I knew he studied MK Ultra. So I went back to his book and to some of his lectures that I saw online about the MK Ultra stuff. And it wasn't until I started really finding out and researching this that he was talking so much about dissociation, that then I was like, oh my God, the dissociation is the part of how you get out and you can get into these ESP states. That's what Project 136 thinks. And I had just written a book on psychic abilities, and I do a lot of psychic, work. So I was like, oh my God. And Dr. Colin Ross is the same person who is the main especially at that time, he was, I think, the world renowned expert on DID. So, but I was only looking at him because of his MK Ultra, like his deep dive into MK Ultra, because he wrote this book. So I wasn't even looking at it in the dissociative or anything to do with DID way. I didn't even connect those two things. And when I started so I was like, oh yeah, didn't Dr. Colin Ross do this? Because he was Roseanne's psychiatrist, because Roseanne Barr has
right.
DID. And so I saw them, I think, together on a lecture from like 15 years ago or something like that. So I didn't even put the dissociative part of any of this together. I was just thinking he was researching MK Ultra from a psychiatrist point of view. So the cognitive part, that's what I was interested in. So I was shocked when the whole thing started. All those synchronicities started piling up. I was like, oh my God, we have to start writing a book on this.
We're going to have to do a part 2 of this. We're going to get into some crazier stuff with another crazy thing that you just found today. So,
well, I could still say that quick, I think.
How much time we got left?
We got 10 minutes.
Okay, go.
So,
this is crazy.
So just before we hopped on here, I was in my FIPA request. So I was scrolling through. I have hundreds.
Can you explain that again, just for people that are listening?
So my FOIA request is I asked the government for my files from when I was in the GATE program, from the school board and from another couple places. So I was looking for this other thing in my FOIA request. So I was flipping through all the pages, and I just randomly happened to see that one of the people that was CC'd on one of these documents from the school board was someone with a last name of Orlikow. I think you pronounce it Orlikov. So Velma,
it's a document that you have, and
from
right
the
at the
Winnipeg
bottom,
Winnipeg School Board. And the guy was a deputy minister of education, this guy. And his last name was Orlikov. And Velma Orlikov, but it's spelled with a W, is Orlikow, was one of the MK Ultra patients. She was from Winnipeg, which is a weird coincidence because I'm from Winnipeg. And she was one of the only people, there was only a handful of people that actually was able to sue the Canadian government. I don't know if she sued the government or Allen Memorial Institute, which was the hospital where she was experimented on by Dr. Ewan Cameron in Montreal, Canada. But she was one of the people that actually got the $100,000. They were allotting $100,000 to anyone who could prove that they were actually in the hospital and something, happened to them under Ewan Cameron, under the MK Ultra, where they were testing some of these people, the depatterning these people. She was one of the only people that actually got this money, and she was from Winnipeg. And it's also weird that her husband in Winnipeg was part of the parliament in Winnipeg, he was the head of the NDP party in Winnipeg.
That's crazy.
So I thought that was weird. So their last name is Orlikov. And when I was looking at these documents, I noticed that there was a Dr. something, Orlikov, being CC'd in the papers. And I was like, that's weird. That's like a weird coincidence. I've never heard that name before. There's a lot of Ukrainian and Polish people in Winnipeg, so that's not surprising, but I mean, that's weird. So I looked up his name. So he was the Deputy Minister of Education. And then I looked up, was he related to Velma and David Orlikov, who were part of who were this couple that she sued the government. MK Ultra. And he was the half brother of David. So Velma's husband's half brother was the Deputy Minister of Education in Winnipeg when I was in school. And the crazy other coincidence is that the date that this document was written was your exact birthday.
The exact day I was born.
The actual day and year you were born. Year you were born. Your actual birth date. So we were like, that's really weird. And then I looked up that guy, and this guy who was listed here was a Harvard graduate in 1956. And in my book, I put that that the Human Ecology Fund, which was the CIA front, the front of where they funneled the money, the CIA, into these universities to be doing these, mind control experiments and all this behavioral modification experiments. They funded Harvard University from 54 to 61, and this guy graduated in 56. So this guy graduated from Harvard that was being funneled money from the CIA for MK Ultra experiments. He graduated while this was happening, and then his half brother's wife was actually MK Ultra in Montreal.
Just a coincidence. It's just a big
That's really weird.
Holy God.
I love to say allegedly, but I mean, that's a really weird, crazy coincidence that I just got like 10 minutes before we started this. I was just going through to find something for this interview, and I found that instead. So yeah, it was very strange.
That's nuts. That's nuts. All right, we're going to do a part 2. That was great.
All right.